I built this from nothing. This is our family.
I want to start at the beginning with Jeff because I know the Bikeriders is inspired by a photo book of the same name by Danny Lyon. But how did that find its way to you, and what made you see it, as a film?
My brother gave it to me, my oldest brother, Ben, who's always been the coolest one in the family. In 2003, he handed me a copy of the book, and I've been obsessed with it ever since. The reason is, you pick Danny's book up and you start to look at the photographs, and they're romantic. They're real easy to spend time with, the faces and the hair and the clothes and the bikes. But then you keep going and you realize, well, Danny wasn't just a photographer. He was really into new journalism at the time. And, the only text in the book are just these transcribed interviews that he made with these people. And they're less romantic. They're sometimes cruel and certainly unvarnished, sometimes hilarious. I realized finally what Danny had given us, which is he had detailed a subculture in its full breadth. And it's really an extraordinary kind of recipe for a filmmaker. I just had to come up with a plot.
I heard that you had actually been wanting to make a movie sort of set in this era about writers for a while.
Well, since 2003. So Michael Shannon shows up to the set of Shotgun Stories, my first film, in 2004, and I pitched him The Bikeriders. He showed up to my second film in 2010, and I pitched him The Bikeriders. And then my third film in 2012, and my fourth film in 2014, and my fifth film in 2015. And my brother's music video in 2018, when he finally said, "You're never making that movie."
So just to spite him, you got this
Just
movie.
to spite Mike Shannon, I got these people together.
Austin, I'm curious, what interested you in the role of Benny? And was it partially the chance to get to ride a bike?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I grew up with a dad who rode motorcycles, and so it planted the seed at a young age, I think. But my sister got in a bad motorcycle accident when she first got her license, and so my mom said, "You're not allowed to ride motorcycles." And my sister's okay. She got scraped up, but
Be terrible if you were laughing.
Yeah. Sometimes I do that when I'm nervous. But so she was okay. But then my dad, he would sneak me out of the house and he would take me to a parking lot and he would teach me how to ride a bit.
No.
And so getting to do that on this was definitely a joy. But it was also, it was my conversations with Jeff and the way that he described Benny. And in the book, you never see his face. You see him leaned over a pool table and just the top of his head, or you see him from behind on a motorcycle. And so he's kind of this mythic figure, and he's also never interviewed. So you learn about him through Kathy's conversation with Danny. I was just fascinated by him. I was very curious into what makes a person the way that he is.
And Jodie, for you, what was your initial reaction when you read the script for specifically to the character of Kathy?
I immediately fell in love with her. I fell in love with the script. I fell in love with her. And then I just remember having a really lengthy Zoom with Jeff where we chatted for 90 minutes, about everything. I shared everything that I thought and I felt and what my instincts were. And at the end of that conversation, Jeff was like, "Oh, just so you know, I have 30 minutes of audio of her. Do you want to have a listen?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." This woman lived what people would say a pretty ordinary life, but she felt extraordinary to me in the way in which she carried herself, and she was incredibly vivacious and honest and brash, and I immediately lent in, and that really intrigued me, especially with her being the narrator of the film. I thought, wow, if I can try and capture an essence of that on screen, that ultimately really excited me. Yeah.
Did you, when you heard that audio and you heard her voice, did you realize you had your work cut out for you?
Totally. I was terrified. I was terrified as well because I didn't, I know Jeff has shared the audio a little bit through this process, but I never knew that was going to happen. And so when I started working with my dialect coach, Victoria Hanlon, who's the best, she was just like, she's from Chicago, but it's every vowel sound is a contradiction. So you have to make the decision, do you want to do a general Chicago or do you want to do this audio? And I was like, well, I want to do the audio, and she is kind of larger in life in that way that I knew there were going to be moments when I was on set some days and it was going to be too much. But I had trust in Jeff. I remember that was a very early conversation that we had with each other where I was just like, just just speak to me and let's try this, and if it's wrong it's wrong, and if it's right it's right. So yeah.
For both you and Austin, actually, when you're perfecting an accent, do you try it out, like out in public? Do you go to the Starbucks and order?
I haven't got
Maybe
the
a bit
guts.
too much. Yeah.
I haven't got the guts. I know Norman. Oh no, Norman
wore the
put his
teeth.
teeth in. Norman was going out with his
You went
teeth
to
in.
Walmart with those
Yeah.
teeth in?
And was like getting gas with his, with his teeth in.
I want some sweatpants.
People are like, "Wow, Norman Reedus looks rough."
Yeah.
And Austin, for you, I mean, you've had good luck with movies set in the 60s and 70s before, so you know this era. But how did you learn about this specific world? And even though you've ridden before, was it different, learning these vintage bikes?
Yeah. So as far as learning, similar to what Jodie was saying, the material in the book was so rich, and it every one of the interviews let you into this world more and more, and so as that coupled with very early on, as soon as we met, I remember our first meeting, me saying, all right, well, I want to learn to take apart a motorcycle, put it back together. I need to get together with whoever knows more about motorcycles in the world than anything else. And so Jeff linked me up with another Jeff Milburn, and the bike that I ride in the film is his personal bike, and most of the bikes you see in the film are his bikes. And so he and I got together early on, and we just rode every day. And his thing to me is, he said, it's just time in the saddle. You just got to get on the bike and ride as much as you can. And those old bikes, they don't like to stop, and they're very heavy, and they're very squeaky, and so you got to get used to all the idiosyncrasies of each one. But they're so beautiful, and they sound. There's nothing like that sound. They don't, new bikes just don't sound like that. It's pretty amazing.
Jeff, you've created this world. It's a period piece. You've got a large ensemble, and you did it on a budget, and it looks fantastic. Can you talk about sort of working with your department heads and people you've collaborated with previously to really create such an authentic world?
It was the largest budget I'd ever had. But
still an indie budget.
In the grand scheme of things, yes, we pulled off some things. The first person I need to talk about is Erin Bennick, my costume designer. I'm not actually really clear on how she pulled off what she did. We would show up to the production office, and there would be guys in the parking lot with belt sanders just laying into denim and leather jackets, the aging, the dying of all the clothes. They had to put all those patches on. It's one of those things, we look at this and we're like, yeah, they look like bikers, but they built the majority of those clothes. They mixed in some vintage pieces, but I mean, it's an extraordinary amount of work that she put in and her team put in. Then Chad Keith, my production designer, and his team went to great lengths to take the photographs and the references that we had and try to bring those to life, down to the linoleum floor that they put in the bar. Their attention to detail was pretty severe.
I mentioned your amazing ensemble, and I just want to talk about sort of the third lead, Tom Hardy, because your chemistry with him, both of you, this is many different kinds of love stories taking place in this movie. Did that develop pretty instantaneously? Is it, or is it sort of do you get to know each other as the film goes on?
It started pretty quickly with the two of us. Jeff was there for our first meeting. Yeah. You want to? We haven't told that story, actually.
So Tom had just walked out of his first fitting, and Austin was there for similar reasons. And I see them meet, and I'm just I'm in a pretend conversation over here, paying attention just to see what happens in the wild when these two people meet. And you had just come off of Dune 2, and Tom is really big into jiu-jitsu. Y'all start talking about some training and some hold, and Tom was like, show me. And he turns around, and Austin's like, okay, puts his arm around his neck and goes, "Gah." And I saw Tom's face. It got him. He just was like, oh, oh. And I'm like, this is the end. We haven't started filming, and this is gonna be it. And Tom taps his arm, and Austin's so sweet, he lets him go. He's like, you okay? And he's like, yeah. And because it's Tom, he's like, do it again. And he did. And then they were
And
friends.
he got me back in that scene where I'm hitting the guy and he has to grab me off of him. Man, I felt the strength of Tom Hardy in that moment. He grabbed me so hard. It was like a grizzly bear grabbing me from
dense.
behind.
He's a dense man.
But I felt so lucky that our relationship was what it was in that movie, because I've admired him for a long time, and he also has such a strong presence. I didn't know what that would be like, and from our first meeting, he was so warm with me and just told me stories for hours and hours and just had me in stitches with his incredible wit, and so yeah, we had a good time together.
I'm curious, have you heard from any of the people involved with the book? Were they at all, aware of the movie?
These are not real people. These are people that were interviewed in 1965, and I took their words, and then I made up the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important because of the story I'm about to tell, because it's in process. We screened at the Chicago International Film Festival, and a man came up to the box office with a letter and said he was Kathy and Benny's son. And that got to the studio, and it eventually got to us. And we didn't know what to do with it. And my producer, Sarah Green, had a really good idea. She was like, give it to Danny Lyon, who's still with us. He's 83, because he knew these people. And Danny recently flew to Chicago to interview this guy, and the story is developing.
Wow. Bikeriders 2? Just to really prove Michael Shannon you can do it?
Exactly.
Well, in the meantime, I want to remind everyone this movie actually opens in theaters this week. Please spread the word. It's such a special film. Thank you so much for being a great audience. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming out on a Sunday night.